So first, I want to talk about Sangrampura massacre. I have no way of knowing. I wish we were doing this in person and we would do a head count or a hand count. How many of you have heard of Sangrampura massacre? I don't think many have. After 19, just let me give you a little background. After 1990, you will recall that assembly elections, for about 7 years, there was no political process, nothing. After 6 years or 7 years, assembly elections were conducted in Jammu and Kashmir in 1996, preceded by Lok Sabha polls. So I think Lok Sabha polls were in May and May roughly at that time period, and assembly elections were then held in September. These were the first elections held after insurgency. Everyone remembers that is an important landmark. A return to so-called democracy after a very turbulent phase. So the spread of terrorism to Jammu had not yet happened. It was not complete yet. It was still around, terrorism was still around in Kashmir Valley. And even though this marked the reintroduction of democracy with elected government in place, that is the time the terrorists realized that this is the time to hit back again after 6 years. On March 22, 1997, Islamist terrorists in Sangrampura, a village 20 miles south of Srinagar, burst into homes of Hindus. Remember, Exodus had already happened, but very few people had stayed back. Very few. You could count them on fingers. So these people were now attacked. So terrorists burst into the homes of Hindus, took away 7 men and killed them point blank. They were all from one extended family. No one has been caught, of course. We have no idea who these terrorists were. All we know were that they were trained by Pakistan and they were Islamist terrorists. But we don't know how they got into this village, except that people who were around that day, they have said that they couldn't find their way into this small, tiny hamlet, small, tiny village if they did not have local support. This was the first massacre of 7 people after 1990, that horrendous thing in the valley. We don't have, I have tried to look for it. I have tried to find the families of those who were killed that day, but I haven't been successful. All I know from the newspaper reports, and I knew around that, but that 7 people were killed that day, 7 men were killed that day, and then no investigation was done. This was the first massacre, which was, the message was sent that anytime Hindus even contemplate coming back home, dead bodies riddled with bullets of those few Hindus who were left in valley will be gifted to them. Before this was in valley in Sangrampura. Before this, just in August 14 of 1993, again, another story that has been completely wiped off. A passenger bus in Kishtwar, in Dura district, was stopped and 15 Hindu passengers were identified and gunned down. I have looked into the, gone back into the newspaper archives, and in very tiny, newspaper columns in one corner, I have found this mentioned in the 4th page, the 6th column or somewhere, buried deep inside that. But I knew from my family contacts that there was a family friend here, and his name was Mr. Kanhaiyalal Dudha. He was shot dead in that massacre, and we heard about that. I remember because I was in Delhi, and I remember that the family friends had said that, he had been shot dead, even though this family had left Kashmir. But I couldn't find anything about this massacre. I couldn't find any more names. Many years later now, just a few years ago, Kanhaiyalal's daughter, thanks to social media, advent of social media, she spoke up and she narrated this story. She said her father's body was delivered to them in Jammu 16 hours after the incident, and it was delivered in a passenger bus. It was not even wrapped in cloth or anything. The body was delivered almost naked. Blood was dripping out of the holes made by bullets in the body. There was no postmortem done for, I think, 24 hours. No attempt was made to reach the family. It was only when the family tried to find out what had happened to him, and they found out. And when they asked the police that who had done it, they said, well, go to Kishtwar and find out. No proper documentation of those dead were known. We know 16 people were killed from the newspaper reports, but I don't have names of other 15 people. So this massacre, this Kishtwar bus massacre, where 16 people were identified as Hindus, made to stand in a separate line and then killed, this has also been wiped clean from any memory or any history book. You can do a Google search or you can find, you won't find much. And if you do, if you are lucky, the victim whose daughter spoke, she found 2 newspaper cuttings and she put them up on social media, very small mention of 16 Hindus who had died. Other than that, you won't find anything.